Court Watch with Alex Swoyer, and I'm excited to bring you the latest episode of my podcast where I am joined by Alliance Defending Freedom attorney Kellie Fiedorek and Elizabeth Gillette, an Oregon school teacher who survived complications from the abortion pill when she was 24 years old. Next week, the justices hear a case over relaxing FDA standards for the abortion pill. The FDA under President Biden moved to allow the pill to be sent through the mail without previous required doctor visits, and also to be used up to 10 weeks of pregnancy instead of the original 7 weeks. A group of pro-life medical providers represented by Alliance Defending Freedom challenged those changes. The case is supposed to be heard next week on Tuesday, and Elizabeth and Kellie will discuss what is exactly at stake. But before I play their interview, there's also a few developments that I think we should discuss from previous episodes where we were highlighting cases, important ones before the court. One is the Supreme Court has unanimously ruled in favor of President Trump keeping him on the ballot. I'm sure all of you had heard about that by now, but we had talked about this in previous episodes with guests, kind of breaking down Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which barred anyone who had participated in an insurrection or rebellion from holding office. If you followed my coverage from the court, I think we posted a video that day from the Supreme Court after oral arguments, and it was pretty clear the majority of the justices, it might have been only Justice Sotomayor, seemed sympathetic to the challengers that were looking to keep, I think it was a group of Colorado voters who were looking to keep Trump off the ballot. She was really the only justice that seemed somewhat sympathetic, but even in the end, she joined the majority, basically saying that states are not allowed to remove Trump's name over January 6th. And so essentially, the insurrection clause cases are all kind of put to bed with that ruling. It was a major win for President Trump. The High Court also unanimously ruled that public officials can be sued for blocking people on social media. This was one of the cases we discussed earlier in the term. There was cases previously about Trump having blocked people, but then that ended up being dismissed. The Supreme Court didn't hear those cases because he left office. So they finally ruled on this issue, which is, a sticky one. There's a couple cases where courts had come out differently on the topic. And the court basically said in some instances that public officials can be sued. They directed lower courts to look at how the account was being used. Was it mainly for public? Was it mainly for a governmental purpose? That sort of thing when deciding whether or not a government official has run afoul of the First Amendment by silencing their critics. The justices recently also heard a separate social media case about the Biden administration's collusion with big tech to silence individuals over misinformation, specifically posts that were about COVID-19 and the 2020 election. A group of individuals in 2 red states had sued the Biden administration after it was revealed that officials had been emailing social media contacts to get certain posts taken down. They claimed the move amounted to a First Amendment violation. During oral arguments, the justices, though, they appeared skeptical of preventing the government from communicating with social media companies. Essentially, they really seemed concerned about the FBI and other law enforcement agencies not being able to reach out to social media platforms and flag terroristic activity, that sort of thing. A decision, though, in the case is expected by the end of June. And in another major case that's up next week, the justices will hear arguments over the FDA's relaxed standards for the abortion drug. Elizabeth Gillette joined me to discuss the emotional and physical pain she experienced from taking the pill. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining the podcast and, discussing your experience using the abortion pill. I guess for our listeners, my understanding is you experienced complications, I think it was when you were 24 years old. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you kind of walk us through what happened and tell us about your story?
Yeah. So I found myself unexpectedly pregnant, like so many women do. Went to an abortion clinic seeking answers and ended up at the end of that appointment consuming the first of the 2 abortion drugs. Went home, and the next day, 24 hours later, as directed, I took the second abortion drug and immediately, probably within 20 minutes, went into labor. And that experience was so unlike what they had told me it would be like, and was so traumatic. I was completely unprepared. I had no idea what I was going into. No one told me that I would actually go into labor. Nobody told me that there would be enormous amounts of blood, vomiting, just these horrific side effects. And I found myself on the bathroom floor sitting in a pool of blood, thinking that I was probably not going to survive this experience. I was preparing myself to die.
And you didn't have, just to clarify, you didn't have like an emergency contact. There was no supervision, nothing like that.
No,
Okay.
nope. They sent me home with a little paper bag with the second pill and an antibiotic that I was supposed to take 3 days later, and said, good luck. We hope you feel relieved. And that is not what I felt. I did not feel relief. I felt terrible. I felt alone. I felt guilty. I felt sad. I felt devastated, deep depression. I developed post-traumatic stress disorder. And the trauma was so severe, especially the moment where I reached down and pulled out of my own body the amniotic sac, perfectly round, transparent, and inside was my perfectly formed baby with eyes and recognizable fingers and toes. And I had to choose in that moment what to do with this baby that nobody told me I would see. They told me I would just see blood, a little like a double period, and some heavy clotting, maybe some pressure. And I ultimately decided to flush my baby down the toilet into a septic tank, which is something that, psychologically does some damage. But nobody told me that there was even any complication regarding psychological effects or emotional effects. That wasn't even on my radar. They told me it would be like a double period, simple, safe, effective, easy. I'd go back to work the next day.
What was your recovery like, both mental health wise, emotional, seeing and experiencing what you did, but then also physical?
So physically, I actually recovered easier than emotionally and psychologically. It took about a month to 6 weeks to stop bleeding. I had vomiting and nausea for about a week and a half. I did have a negative reaction to the antibiotics that they gave me because without proper care, they did not complete any kind of questioning about what are you allergic to. They just handed me some medication and I trusted them and I took it and had a reaction. Psychologically and emotionally and even spiritually, I still deal with the trauma and the ramifications of that. I still have post-traumatic stress today. I have a service dog to help me in that, to get through the day when I have episodes of that. I still have nightmares. I, still have problems relating to people when it comes to certain topics or certain things. I'm very triggered by things. So it's not something that was safe, easy, or, like a Tylenol. This is something that has affected my life in a negative way and continues to affect my life in a very negative way.
And with the Supreme Court hearing this case next week, I guess what do you hope is the outcome? What the justices understand here, and also how your story and a ruling in favor of ADF, for example, how do you think that could help other women?
Yeah, what's important is that, no matter how you feel about abortion, right? Whether you're for it or against it, women like me exist, many of us, and women have found themselves on the bathroom floor just like me in pools of blood without anybody to do this with them, without anyone to protect them. And I really hope that through this process, the Supreme Court will understand that we are here and we are suffering and we do deserve safety nets and safeguards. And when people prescribe these dangerous, powerful drugs, it's not like a Tylenol. This is a very serious procedure. And what it did to me, it will continue to do to other women. And that is a tragedy. And American women should not ever have to go through something like this, ever.
Kellie, I wanted to ask you real quick. There's been a lot of focus in the news, like about abortion, another major abortion case. But legally speaking, is this about agency kind of run amok? I guess you could put it that way. Can you tell us, like, legally, what is the focus of what we're dealing with here with the FDA?
Certainly. The issues that are before the court are specifically whether or not the FDA violated the Administrative Procedure Act. And it did so when in 2016 and then in 2021, it removed nearly all of its original safeguards, including the in-person doctor visits. Those 3 in-person doctor visits were required by the FDA to check women for ectopic pregnancies, severe bleeding, life-threatening infections. And yet the FDA decided to remove all of those safeguards, even the last one without even adequate studies to support it, and endangered the women's health and safety in doing so.
Like Elizabeth, Correct.
Like Elizabeth,
A
exactly.
perfect
That's
example.
right, as a perfect example. And that's why Doctors Medical Association said enough is enough. We have to hold the FDA accountable for its unlawful actions, for its recklessness. And we don't want to see any more patients or women like Elizabeth suffering at the hands of the FDA that's completely failed to do its job. So they decided to sue the FDA to hold it accountable, and we can't wait to have this case before the court.
And my last question, I don't know if you guys saw it. There's like a pro-abortion group with the I'm saying it wrong. The Guttmacher Institute. Okay, yes. So they put out, I think it was like a study that showed, I think it was more than a double-digit increase in the use of the abortion pill over the last year. What kind of concerns do you have about, if that number is accurate, what concerns do you have for women? I mean, that's even more than what we've been talking about in the past of women who could experience or go through what Elizabeth has had to endure.
Well, my concern is that the FDA is leaving women and young girls to take these drugs all alone by themselves, sometimes in their homes, in their dorm rooms, without ever having seen a doctor in person, without any medical supervision, without any ongoing care. They're leaving them to take these high-risk drugs that way. Something I think it's really important to note is that the FDA's own label says that roughly 1 in 25 women who take these drugs will end up in the emergency room. This is not an easy drug. It's not a safe drug. Women deserve to have excellent health care when it comes to taking these drugs, and that's what we're asking the FDA to reinstate.
Before we close out this interview, is there anything either of you all think I missed, I should have asked you, that other reporters don't ask, that you think is important to highlight?
Well, one thing I would say, Alex, is that I think this goes back to what Elizabeth was saying, is regardless of people's position on abortion itself, women deserve to have the ongoing care of a physician when they're taking high-risk drugs. This is common sense. What we're asking the court is very basic. It's very straightforward. When an agency acts unlawful, it should be held accountable, and especially so when women's lives and health is at stake.
A decision on the challenge to the FDA's relaxed abortion pill standards is expected by the end of June. Thanks for tuning in to my podcast, Court Watch. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so, and also feel free to email me interesting questions or topics you want explored about the legal reporting world. I'll do my best to answer them during each episode. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Listen to my podcast, Court Watch, at WashingtonTimes.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.